Jet Airways, very much for joining us on India Business Hour. I'm Shireen Bhanda. Well, let's start with a quick check of the action on the Lal Street. After seeing a big rally yesterday, the market's taking a breather and they saw a range-bound day of trade. The Nifty giving up the 10,900 mark. The Sensex ended just above the flat line. In the broader markets, banks saw gains of 0.3%, while mid-cap sulked in trade to end 0.1% lower. So mixed picture there as far as our markets are concerned. But the big story tonight is cnbc TV 18 exclusive news break. Time is running out for debt-ridden and cash-strapped Jet Airways. Existing investor Etihad has offered a bailout package, but with conditions attached. First, Etihad has proposed to invest at 150 rupees per share. That's a discount of about 55% per share at current market price. Second, it wants the market regulator SEBI to exempt it from preferential pricing norms as well as an open offer. It also doesn't want to pledge additional shares to raise debt. Third, Etihad says the debt to Naresh Goyal and related parties should not be converted to equity, and bankers should insist on a moratorium on debt taken from Goyal. Amidst all of this, we learned that lenders seem to be in agreement with the resolution plan. Lata Venkatesh and Ritu Singh join us now with the latest. Lata, to you first. Take us through the deal that Etihad has brought to the table. It is willing to put in more money, but with conditions and caveats attached. The question is, will those fly?
Well, most of them are now in the public domain almost since they've been widely reported. When we broke the story, it was a bit of a shock because the expectation was that Etihad is going to play the white knight. What we now realize is Etihad is ready to do that, but at a price that they will bring their money only if the share is priced at 150 rupees. Now, they've, of course, said that they're already in touch with SEBI and they want SBI to use their good offices to get the government, the Civil Aviation Ministry also, to convince SEBI to give them a written permission to bring the money at this lower price and not at the market price or at the SEBI preferential issue pricing formula. What lawyers tell us is that while this may be difficult, getting permission from so many sources at such short notice, the more easier thing to do would be to do a rights issue in which obviously Naresh Goyal and related parties may not be able to participate because they're cash strapped. I mean, if they can participate, they would have perhaps paid up already. In a rights issue, it's perfectly possible for one set of partners to come in at a discounted price because anyway the equity will be diluted and therefore the share price is bound to fall. The other proposals they're making is that Naresh Goyal's rights should be completely restricted. That is, the stake should be restricted to 22%, that they should at best be allowed 2 seats. In fact, not even that. They and the lenders, if the lender's debt is converted into equity, should together have only 2 seats in the board. The others should be professionally chosen, independent directors. As well, the position being that, we are restricted, we can't bring beyond 49%, we can do only creeping acquisition. Then let Naresh Goyal also be restricted with enough controls, since he has not obviously delivered in the past. So it is those restrictions they want. And even as that was publicized, you got this public announcement, press release from Jet Airways, not quite agreeing to everything. It was a very, very clinical press release which merely said that there is a resolution plan which requires a change in equity and debt and change in board. So it does look like there is some objection to all their conditions from the Naresh Goyal side. All
right, appreciate you joining us with that, Lata. Ritu, coming to you now, what are you picking up from banking sources? Lenders met today to take stock of the resolution plan. It was a crucial meeting. What can we expect, and the possibility of a third party still coming on board?
We're given to understand from top banking sources that the lender consortium to Jet Airways is broadly in agreement with the resolution plan that is under discussion. We understand that the resolution plan that is being discussed currently, which is a draft plan at this stage, entails the conversion of about 800 to 1,000 crore rupee of that total 8,200 crore debt that is held on the book of Jet Airways as equity by the lenders. In addition, we're also given to understand that post this restructuring, Naresh Goyal's stake will fall to almost half of where it currently is. And, we also are given to understand that Naresh Goyal has communicated to the lenders that he is agreeable to these terms, wherein his stake falls below 25% also, and there will be no resistance from Naresh Goyal when, such an action is taken. We're given to understand that none of this restructuring will happen without the infusion of fresh funds into the company, whether it comes from Etihad or from the Tatas or from a third investor. The infusion of fresh capital into Jet is, a mandatory condition set by the lenders, and that will be done at the SEBI as per the SEBI ICDR formula, and not by any price set by, a particular stakeholder. In this instance, that is Etihad asking to invest at 150 per share. Now, these are broadly the contours that are under discussion. We understand that there will be similar meetings held with the bankers to crystallize on the way forward for Jet Airways.
Okay, Ritu and Lata, thanks very much. Will the government consider Etihad's investment proposal? Will the regulator play ball? Up ahead on the show, we speak with Mohit Saraf, Senior Partner at Luthra & Luthra, Jitendra Bhargav, former Executive Director at Air India, and Sandeep Parekh, Managing Partner at FitSec Law Advisors. Well, the twist in the SR Steel saga. While lenders await the National Company Law Tribunal's nod for ArcelorMittal's resolution offer, State Bank of India has decided to get rid of its loan. SBI has announced that it's looking to sell its entire SR Steel exposure worth 15,400 crore rupees to asset reconstruction companies, banks and foreign institutions. Ritu is still with us. Ritu, why some decision by State Bank of India to sell the loans just before the case was supposed to get resolved? And what's the kind of haircut that we're talking about under this plan versus what was being proposed by ArcelorMittal?
Well, time is money, and with every day of delay in the courts in the SR Steel insolvency case, banks are losing real money, and therefore we understand that State Bank of India has now put its entire 15,400 crore rupee exposure that it has to SR Steel on the block for sale to ARCs or other banks or other financial institutions, and the reserve price has been set at about 9,500 crore rupees, which entails a haircut of 38%. Now compare this with what bankers would be getting from the ArcelorMittal offer, which has been approved by the lender consortium, where SBI was expecting a recovery of about 11,300 crore rupees, entailing a lower haircut of 26%. Why, one would ask then, is SBI willing to let go of that higher offer and sell this account at the earliest? Well, that's because, with every day, the banks have lost a lot of money, and perhaps, they're really frustrated with the kind of delays that we're seeing in courtrooms in many of these NCLT cases. Do remember, this is not the first time that SBI has tried to sell this SR exposure. Last year in September as well, State Bank of India did try to sell this, but there were no takers at that time. Also, we're given to understand that 18th of January is the deadline by when the expressions of interests have been invited, and 30th of January is when the e-bidding will be conducted, which is just a day before the NCLT hearing in the SR Steel matter.
Okay, Ritu, appreciate you joining us with that. Interesting, the timing of SBI's decision to hawk its exposure to SR Steel. Now, CNBC TV18 Newsbreak confirmed in a breather for startups and their investors, the government has issued a notification making it easy for startups to seek tax exemption on angel fund investments. In fact, the Gazette notification has just been put out. Ritu Panabhiyan joins us now with the details. So, Ritu, exactly what we had reported, essentially doing away with the interministerial board, also saying that exemptions, the CBDT should be able to grant an approval or decline the request in 45 days.
Reporting, they have done away with the condition of having a merchant banker specifying the fair market value, and instead two specific conditions have been put: one for the startups, secondly for the investor. For startups, if they want to apply for exemption, then the aggregate amount of paid up share capital that will not be able to exceed 10 crore rupees. That's condition number one. As far as investor is concerned, 50 lakh crore minimum returned income in the preceding year of investment, and a net worth exceeding 2 crore. And as we have been saying, the interministerial panel has been done away with. DIPP will be taking the applications and will be then forwarding it to CBDT. Now, sources from DIPP have just told us that this will also cover startups before 2015 as well. And as we have been reporting, sources have confirmed that, and this is also mentioned in the notification, doing away with the interministerial panel, because the interministerial panel was not being able to resolve many issues, and hence now that has been done away with. CBDT has been bought in. Within 45 days, CBDT will say if a startup is eligible for Section 56 exemption or not. With that, it's
I want to congratulate the government for being receptive and trying to help out and suggest some improvement to whatever has been said. First improvement should be that this, if a startup raises 10 crores of money in a year, that they should be exempt from the Section 56 if you raise up to 10 crores. Second, the condition about those investors should be an or and not an and. That means if there are a set of investors who are, got those kind of income and the assets. Two more points is that, look, many of the startups raise money from friends and family. Your father may give 5 lakhs, your mother may give 5 lakhs because they come from smaller towns, and we should have an exemption for those people. The last point which we should talk about is what happens to those people who have already got notices, whose assessments have been happened. We need a mechanism where those companies can apply under these conditions, whatever enumerated, and if you pass the conditions, the certificate should go up to the assessing officer in appeal, the commissioner, and the commissioner to take cognizance of this when he decides to appeal. You cannot direct the commissioner to do a particular thing, but you can say that, look, please take cognizance of this. It's gone through the process. It's gone through this. Please do that.
The ideal thing would be for Section 56, this part of it, to actually be abolished, because it's a very bad formulation of a tax. Because what it does is it's trying to prevent illegal or fraudulent transactions of the kind where, favors are done from within government or politicians or whatever, and then somebody buys shares at very high prices. In the meantime, what has been attempted, as I can see, is a carve-out. Now, carve-outs can work very well.
I myself have applied in IMB. If the process is same, only the department is changing, there is actually no change. What they're telling is instead of DIPP you applying, you will now apply to CBDT. This mechanism of getting an application through CBDT, through the interministerial body of 8 undersecretaries have been replaced by some other people whom I am worried about their knowledge. At least these people, we could rely on. Now, somebody else will be looking at who will not understand what valuation is. Here again, the biggest concern we have is most of our notices are against Section 56. Here, at least whatever I can understand from the notification which is right now coming, whatever point they are talking about is Section 68.
Well, notification now come in from the DIPP dealing with some of the concerns. As you saw there, startups basically saying that this is a step in the right direction, addresses some of their concerns, not all. It's a carve-out that addresses the middle path, but not an ideal situation. The Reserve Bank, meanwhile, has simplified rules for all Indian companies raising foreign loans. Hereafter, all eligible companies can borrow up to $750 million without any restriction on what they will use the money for. The new rules are particularly good for housing finance and non-bank finance companies who hitherto had more restrictions. Lata is back with us to take us through the details of the ECB relaxation. Lata, implications, who benefits?
Well, basically, the rules are very simple. They just say that anybody who is eligible for FDI is eligible for ECB. So all the earlier restrictions go, and anyone who is eligible can borrow up to $750 million. So that sets aside a whole spate of old circulars. So who were not benefited in the previous dispensation? Housing finance companies had to use most of their ECBs for homes under 60 square meters. Now they can use it for any purpose whatsoever. NBFCs required case-by-case approval, and even when they got approval, they had hedging prescriptions and stuff like that. Now, one shot $750 million is allowed. All of them can borrow for 3 years. Hitherto, there was a track 1 and a track 2. Track 1 were all the 3 and 5 year categories. Track 2 were those who borrowed for 10 years. They had fewer restrictions. The REITs and InvITs came in that category. Now you can raise a REIT for 3 years. You can raise an InvIT for 3 years. There are no time or tenor restrictions or end-use restrictions on anyone. Also, there used to be restrictions on software companies, 200 million, microfinance companies, 100 million. All that goes now. Everyone has just one cap, $750 million. So definitely a simpler regime is on the cards.
All right, a simpler regime. Good news coming in there on the ECB front. Thanks very much, Lata. On to a CNBC TV 18 exclusive. Sources tell us that the next tranche of bank recapitalization bonds will be issued after the 15th of February. Remember, recap bonds to the tune of almost 50,000 crore rupees are still to be allocated. Sapna, who's been tracking that story, joins us now with more. Sapna, what else are you picking up? Which of these public sector banks that are likely to benefit?
Well, first and foremost, whatever remains in terms of the recapitalization amount, 55,000 crores is what we are given to understand worth of recap bonds still waiting to be infused. Well, the government most likely will go ahead and infuse all of that quantum into the PSBs by the end of the financial year. So that's the first clarity. Most likely, the next tranche of recapitalization of particular banks will start after 15th of Feb. Probably the government would like to wait for the Q3 results to come out to get a clearer picture as to how much the allocation should be for which bank. Having said that, a clear focus continues to remain in terms of the PCI banks. So whatever recapitalization will now come through in the next tranche will definitely be a further help to those banks under the PCI framework to meet the regulatory requirements. Quick candidates for an exit from the PCI framework, of course, those names are well spoken about. Probably Bank of India, Oriental Bank of Commerce, Bank of Maharashtra. Most of these banks are somewhere close to meeting the NNPA ratios as well as the capital requirement, and that is being held by the government. The profitability angle is what remains to be seen. So possibly post-March, there could be some positive movement on that front as well. This is the hope in the policy circles. But clearly, after 15 Feb is the next tranche of recapitalization for particular banks, and that's a big amount that we are talking about.
Okay, Sapna, thanks very much. But here's the big national story creating a controversy. President Ramnath Kovind has cleared the elevation of Justice Sanjeev Khanna and Justice Dinesh Maheshwari to the Supreme Court. But their appointment has already drawn severe criticism from a number of retired judges. That's not all. We learned that at least 2 members of the 5-member Supreme Court Collegium had initially opposed their elevation. The Bar Council has also now taken up this issue. Ashmit Kumar joins us now with the details. Ashmit, the presidential nod coming in for their appointment to the Supreme Court, but this is a matter that has deeply divided the legal fraternity and even the collegium.
Indeed. In fact, to begin with, consider this. This approval from the government with respect to the recommendation from the collegium came within 6 days, and compare that against the time taken by the government for approving the recommendation involving Justice K.M. Joseph, which took 206 days. So again, there has been extremely fast pace, there has been urgency, there has been haste in terms of the government moving ahead, approving these recommendations. But coming to the opposition itself, opposition within the legal fraternity, well, what we're picking up is that from highly placed sources is that within the collegium itself, the collegium of course consists of the 5 judges, the 5 top judges, including the CJI. Of them, 2 out of 5 have expressed concern with respect to not only the substance but also the process that has been followed with respect to the 2 names that have gone through Justice Khanna as well as Justice Maheshwari. What we understand is that with respect to Justice Khanna, the concern appears to be that he's relatively junior. With respect to Justice Maheshwari, he received flack for his functioning from no less than the retired Supreme Court Judge Justice Chalameshwar. Not just that, what complicates matters even further is that in the month of December, when the collegium had last met, there was near consensus on very senior names, names such as Justice Menon, Chief of the Delhi High Court, Justice Nandrajog, who's the Chief of the Rajasthan High Court, Justice Geeta Mittal, who happens to be the Chief of the J&K High Court, as well as Justice Bhatt, a very senior judge of the Delhi High Court as well. And what we saw is that on January 10th, just a month later, that consensus that was built, these names that were drawn out, all those names had been cast aside and 2 fresh names had been proposed. We picked up from sources that Justice Gogoi stood firm on his position, ensured the judges fell in line, and ensured that those 2 names went through, which in turn has invited a fair bit of criticism against not just Justice Gogoi, but also the very functioning of the collegium, raising very, very serious questions about the decision-making process. So clearly, there being tough questions being asked, essentially, the government going ahead and ensuring that the name goes through within 6 days of the recommendation coming in. Back to you.
Well, that certainly is speed when we compared what happened previously. Thanks very much, Ashmit, for joining us with the latest on the battle that has divided the legal fraternity. On to some corporate news from courtrooms now. The Delhi High Court has granted partial relief to HUL in the anti-profiteering case. The court today decided to stay the penalty on the FMCG giant imposed by the National Anti-Profiteering Authority, or the NAA. Remember, the NAA had slapped a 462 crore rupee fine last month for failing to pass the benefit of lowered GST on certain products. The court has directed the anti-profiteering body not to continue with any penalty proceedings against HUL till until the final judgment is passed. It's also directed HUL to deposit 90 crore rupees in 2 installments in the Consumer Welfare Fund. The company has to pay 50 crore rupees by the 15th of March and the remaining 40 crore rupees by the middle of May this year. So some relief there for HUL. Prime Minister Modi-led 3-member selection panel is expected to meet on the 24th of January to appoint the new CBI chief. This news comes a day after Congress leader Mallikarjun Kharge said that the appointment of Nageshwara Rao as the CBI interim chief is illegal and sought immediate meeting of the Prime Minister-led panel. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court has agreed to hear a plea challenging the appointment of Nageshwara Rao as the interim chief of the agency. But the big global headline this evening, Theresa May faces a no-confidence vote later this evening. Less than 24 hours after her Brexit deal was voted down by the British Parliament, May's Brexit deal faced a resounding defeat with 432 lawmakers voting against it. This makes it one of the worst political defeats in the British Parliament's history. The UK government now has 3 working days to map out a new plan of action. William Marks joins us with more. William, crucial day for Theresa May.
Last night's defeat was the largest single vote defeat by a government inside Parliament since the 19th century, and it's left Theresa May with some very difficult decisions to make. In response to that defeat, she said that she would reach across the political spectrum here in the United Kingdom looking for solutions to this political impasse over Brexit. In response to the massive defeat, the leader of the Labour opposition party, Jeremy Corbyn, announced that he had tabled a motion of no confidence in the government, and that is currently being debated inside the Westminster Palace behind me right now and will face a vote later on this evening. Theresa May is expected to win that because it would require members of her own Conservative Party to vote against their own government in order for her to lose. But after that point, it's not entirely clear what she's prepared to do to try and find a consensus from within inside the House of Commons. She's already ruled out the idea of a second referendum that many MPs have advocated for. She's also said that a full-time permanent customs union with the European Union, a so-called softer Brexit, is not something she's prepared to countenance. This is, of course, because she wants to restrict freedom of movement and she wants Britain to have an independent trade policy. 2 things that she seems to think the voters in the UK voted for back in 2016, and 2 things that she's not prepared to give up under any circumstances. Whether she's able to find a majority in the Parliament that will support her vision of Brexit remains to be seen, but if she does lose the vote tonight, we could see a general election being triggered in as little as 2 weeks' time.
Should the next step be a general election? I believe that is the worst thing we could do. It would deepen division when we need unity. It would bring chaos when we need certainty. And it would bring delay when we need to move forward. So I believe this House should reject this motion. At this crucial moment in our nation's history, a general election is simply not in the national interest. Parliament decided to put the question of our membership of the European Union to the people. Parliament proposed to abide by the result, promised to abide by the result. Parliament invoked Article 50 to trigger the process. And now Parliament must finish the job.
Well, that's Theresa May facing an uncertain future and a vote in Parliament.
Well, good evening once again and welcome back. You're watching India Business Hour Plus. Now let's revisit one of our top stories from the aviation space. Etihad Group has made a conditional proposal to invest in debt-laden and cash-strapped Jet Airways. Meanwhile, banking sources tell us that the lenders consortium is broadly in agreement with Jet's resolution plan. Now, Shireen Bhan caught up with Mohit Saraf, senior partner at Luthra & Luthra, Jitendra Bhargava, former executive director of Air India, as well as Sandeep Parekh, managing partner at FinSec Law Advisors. Here's a slice of that conversation. Take a look.
Mohit Saraf, let me start by asking you, and you heard the details of the kind of caveats and conditions that Etihad has brought to the table, as well as the point of view of the lenders consortium. A, do you believe that this business of preferential pricing, the exemption from the ICDR regulations that Etihad is seeking will fly at all? And is the rights issue then the way out of that?
Yes. I think typically, even if you assume right now that the present case fall under the February 12 circular, where bank is restructuring it and transferring control, then also the pricing guideline still stays. So I would say because of that, the right issue looks like one of the way to go it forward, where Naresh Goyal and his team does not subscribe to his right. That is one way of doing it. And then you have a provision that all unsubscribed shares are taken over by Etihad, so by which they can go there. But again, that will trigger an open offer, and which is a challenge here, because I think really clearly the company needs cash, and therefore they will try to avoid. But again, since this is the JET has defaulted on December last year, and this February 12th circular has triggered in, and in that case you can actually find an exemption under open offer. So I would say really open offer exemption is pretty easy to obtain, as long as the debt is being restructured under February 12th circular.
Okay, so Sandeep, on both those issues, the possibility of a rights issue to get around the condition that Etihad is attached of 150 rupees per share, though the bankers do tell us that that's unlikely to fly, but the rights issue could perhaps be a way out of that. And on the open offer, not just what Mohit Saraf mentioned there as the possibility of an exemption under the Feb 12th circular, but also past precedents. When we saw the takeover of SpiceJet by Ajit Singh when he acquired 58.46%, the competent authority, that was the Ministry of Civil Aviation, did grant a nod from the exception, gave the exception as far as the open offer was concerned, which was taken forward by SEBI. On both these issues, Sandeep, your point of view.
Hi, Shireen. So, yes, I think, if it's considered as a court approval / competent authority approved restructuring, they could get away with, not making an open offer. But the ICDR pricing requirements still remain, and, those cannot be waived, because there is kind of an exemptive authority, but that's only for kind of technical breaches and, not even technical breaches, but minor issues which need to be ironed out. So this is a substantive exemption they're seeking, and I don't think that will fly at all.
Okay.
And entire SEBI board unanimously also cannot kind of override their own regulations. So I don't see that happening. So I agree with Mohit that, it should be, rights offering might be a way out.
Okay.
Yes, I think they could probably get away with getting an exemption under the open offer requirement, but not the pricing. Not the pricing,
and the rights issue could be the way out as far as the preferential pricing issue is concerned. But Mr. Bhargav, let me ask you this now, and I'm reading out from the statement that Jet Airways has put out, which says that we're looking at various options, debt equity, mixed proportion of equity infusion by various stakeholders, and the consequent change in the composition of the company's board of directors. We're also given to understand, as our colleagues were reporting, that Naresh Goyal may now be finally agreeable to giving up control, which means bringing down his stake below 25%, perhaps even as low as 22%. But given the FDI guidelines, that is also going to have to be a challenge, won't it?
Well, there are challenges galore. If you look at it, Naresh Goyal has put Jet Airways in a corner where there are little options left with him. Now, you have the Etihad on one side, the bankers on the other side, and let's not forget the Kingfisher saga. Banks will be very, very cautious this time.
Right.
Conversion into equity loan, that's again a question mark, could be debatable later, could be a cause of inquiry later. Now, what do you do in these circumstances? Jet Airways has to raise funds. Etihad can put in money up to a certain extent, and if they save 150 rupees per share is what we're going to give. So we're not talking of a huge sum. They may just meet the current kind of liabilities that they have. Now, what do you do in the thing? So I've always brought in this element of market dynamics. Indian market is price sensitive. There is little scope for full service carriers to be generating surplus. It's the low cost airlines which are really getting the right fare for the product. Now, if you're not going to see the light at the end of the tunnel, even after putting in money, why will anybody put in money? So if State Bank of India agrees, or the consortium agrees to convert this loan into equity, what happens subsequently when the market share of Jet Airways get further marginalized? Value erosion takes place.
So you're saying that there has to be a fundamental change as far as the business model is concerned and the product offering itself is concerned.
Business model is one, but these conditions that we're saying, Naresh Goyal on his own cannot change the market dynamics. It's controlled by very many other airlines in the market. The fares will not go up. There's a large number of aircraft which have been ordered. They'll be inducted in the next few years. Last year, 120 aircraft got added. So how are you going to be sustaining. So it's both applicable to Etihad. They put in the money. They're expecting their capital at least to be protected. Likewise with the bankers. Now, what do you do in these circumstances? So the condition that they've done, which I would agree with, is that, look, should Naresh Goyal continue to be at the helm of affairs? The answer is no. He's nurtured the airline. There is a natural reluctance in a person who's nurtured for 25 years to give up control. But the fact is, either he sacrifices interests or he sacrifices Jet Airways. So Jet Airways should be there from the country's perspective. We can't have another airline going under so soon after Kingfisher and very many small airlines in the process. So there is something that needs to be done. Now, government coming in and expecting. I don't expect NDA government so close to the elections to do phone banking, as Prime Minister Modi said once, to say, look, State Bank, take a lenient view and do this, and then face the consequences if there's a government change. So people will be extra circumspect as far as these things are concerned. But the fact is, we must blame Naresh Goyal and Jet Airways, board included. 6 months ago, they made a public pronouncement that we are going to be cutting down or delaying salary payment to pilots, engineers, and highly paid management staff. Why did they roll it back? They knew the crisis is on hand. They should have been taking. So I am not reading in today's statement issued that we are going to get into cost control and other things, because most of the cost control measures have already been implemented. Food, denial of lounge facilities for the premium passengers, etc. Everything has been done. So where are they going to look for? The future looks bleak. Something needs to be done. We don't want Jet Airways to go down under. But what are the options? I think they're very, very limited options at the moment.
Okay, Mohit Saraf, let me come to you now with that question that, as Mr. Bhargav pointed out, this might end up being a temporary bailout if certain other tough decisions that Jet Airways needs to take are not taken. But to your mind, sticking with the current resolution plan that is being worked out, what do you see as the big challenges? And also, from an FDI regulation perspective, what would the concerns be if Naresh Goyal's share were to fall below 25%?
I think really under the FTI, Etihad can go up to 49%. Foreign ownership is allowed up to 100%. But again, if you look at the FEMA circular, it says that the substantial control and ownership should stay with Indian citizen. And I think that's a big challenge, because I think even if Naresh Goyal sells 26% shares, so he comes back down from 51 to 25%, 26% who's going to buy? If it is an Indian, easy. But if it is a foreign private equity or somebody else, then the control issue will be important. And eventually, it can stay with Indian citizen. But really, the Indian citizen will be nominees of the shareholders who are foreign. So I would say there is a lot of changes which need to be thought through, particularly under the FTI circular.
Let me ask you a hypothetical question. Let me ask you a hypothetical question. You know, in terms of a third party, one is hearing the possibility of a private equity global giant being on the table. Talks have not really moved or progressed, but that could be an option. Now, will that run foul as well of the FDI regulation, where substantial ownership and control has to rest with an Indian promoter?
No, actually, I think the circulars have to be read together. I think once you allow 100% ownership, then the FEMA is reflecting that. And I think, but the FEMA is saying the ownership and control should stay with Indian citizen. So even if the Indian citizen are nominee of foreign company, is that okay or not? That's one issue. And I think we need to look at that, and they have to find a solution. But I think the bigger issue would be like the pricing guideline. If there is a big sophisticated private equity which is across the border, foreign private equity, then the pricing guideline will still work. And if Etihad is buying at 150, they'll probably be buying at 270. So it's going to be a big challenge. So I would say really all these issues have to be thought through. But again, these are probably very initial days, and most likely the solution will be under February 12th circular. Because if they can't find a solution, like getting an exemption like SpiceJet, I would say is pretty remote. It has happened once, probably never happened again. And therefore, the only solution is to get out of the takeover code, because really at the end of the day, Etihad is not going to put money to buy public shareholders and the company does not get cash. If the company does not get cash, the banks have made a precondition that the equity should show up first before they can give financing. So I would say exemption on open offer. I don't know about pricing guideline, but again, banks can actually convert at a different price, and they can banks can play a much bigger role at converting and selling to us or selling to Etihad at a different price. If they can do that, probably can be some solution, but preferential guideline pricing will be a big problem.
That will be a big problem, as you point out. For now, it continues to be uncertain times for Jet, but perhaps we could see some forward movement on some of the ideas that have been discussed. Mohit Saraf, Jitendra Bhargav, appreciate you joining us here.
So there could be some regulatory hurdles if that resolution plan is to go through. Well, the stage is set for the most anticipated Business Leadership Awards of the year. Now, in less than 24 hours, CNBC TV 18 will honor the best leaders in the business world. 2018 now was a year that saw some companies rewrite business rules with their aggressive growth numbers. Now, at the CNBC TV 18 India Business Leader Awards, we honor disruptors who led from the front. And here are the nominations. Take a look.
Call them game changers or market movers. These are the companies that have left an impressionable imprint, brands that have changed the way Indian millennials live. CNBC TV 18 takes a minute to look at this year's disruptors and highlight their business models as they scale the ladder of success. With an annual client acquisition rate between 200 to 300% in the last 5 years and 8.47 lakh active clients as of December 2018, this 8-year-old stockbroking company, founded by brothers Nitin and Nikhil Kamath, emerged as the investors' favorite in 2018 and became India's largest broking firm. Using technology and transparency as its primary differentiators, Zerodha is India's first discount brokerage and has changed the game in its market segment. Delivering 60,000 products across 1,000 brands to homes in 26 Indian cities is no joke. But online grocer Big Basket has managed to do just that and is also targeting a top line or gross sales of 3,500 to 4,000 crore rupees for FY19. A true game changer in its segment, Big Basket witnessed China's Alibaba come on board as an investor in February of 2018, raising over $200 million in Series E funding. With almost 10 million customers in its kitty, Big Basket will be reinvesting into marketing, infrastructure and technology for deeper penetration into existing markets. In a deeply competitive and congested marketplace, Chinese smartphone maker Xiaomi has clearly understood what Indian customers want. The result? Emerging as the leader of the pack for 3 consecutive quarters in 2018, ousting Korean giant Samsung to a distant second spot. Ending Q3 of 2018 with 27.3% market share, Xiaomi is already looking ahead to a bumper year with new launches including the Redmi Pro 2, Redmi 7, 7A, Note 7, Mi A3 and Mi 9. The smartphone segment in India has never looked more robust, and Xiaomi believes marrying affordability and technology will keep them at the helm in 2019 as well. Global video streaming service provider Netflix entered the Indian market in January 2016, and there's been no looking back since. Sacred Games, Love Per Square Foot and Selection Day reflect Netflix's commitment of investing heavily into local original programming in India. Doubling tech resources in the country, increasing regional content and experimenting with lower price models is how Netflix aims to trump competitors like Amazon Prime and Hotstar here. With hundreds of millions of smartphone users, Netflix is betting on India to play the pivotal role in increasing its base of operations and expanding into the larger APAC market. A 15-year-old weather forecasting and agricultural risk solutions company, SkyMet, is today considered one of India's most accurate sources of sectoral information. A combination of synoptic and climatological data, weather satellites, and numerical weather predictions has resulted in Jatin Singh's SkyMet giving India's big daddy of weather forecasting, the IMD, a run for its money. 2018 also witnessed SkyMet's collaboration with weather giant UCAR for a 5-year term, which gives them access to the best technology in the world, as the company aims to improve accuracy of forecasts, save lives, and increase productivity of Indian farmers and businesses.
To mark your calendar, the biggest night of corporate India Business Leader Awards is less than 24 hours away. We'll get you an up-close and personal and intimate look at some of the biggest corporate leaders of modern India. But with that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Business Hour. Thank you so much for watching.